All right, so round two. So in this game, this is coming right off my loss against my first Grandmaster that I've ever played. So in this game, I'm playing Cody Wu, who's lower rated than me. So I really want, and I have the white pieces, so I really want to get a win to sort of bounce back in the tournament. So I play d4. We have a Slav, and against the Slav, I was experimenting with this knight f3 and e3 setup where my bishop stays on c1 to avoid the sharpest lines of the Slav with d takes c4. But there's a lot of interesting uh, play that I can sometimes get even with the bishop within the pawn chain. And in the case that black brings the bishop outside of the pawn chain, it can be sort of hit around with the knight. And in a lot of the lines, black actually gives up the bishop pair, and in the late endgame, the bishop pair it can be very useful with white. So that's sort of the long-term idea of this setup. In the game, a6 was played, and I decide on knight bd2. And here I'm already sort of not really in book. I haven't really looked at this setup for black very much, but I know that, like, I can sort of fianchetto the dark square bishop. I can now I can recapture the pawn with the knight, and maybe even if after playing b3 I can recapture with the pawn. And I'll just develop normally with bishop t3 or maybe to e2, castle short, and it's with white you can sort of get away with not really knowing the specifics of these positions. And you just develop your pieces to normal squares, and there's going to be chances later on. So white always has sort of like a little edge regardless of the move that's played. It's not really relevant what moves you play. So bishop f5, knight h4, bishop goes to g6. And here, I can think about leaving the bishop because it doesn't really have a way to stay on the board, but sometimes he plays bishop h5, and sometimes it's the knight's sort of like he's always going to be threatening stuff that I have to calculate. And in the game 45 time control, especially after my time management in the previous game, I sort of just want to play moves relatively quick that I know are fine. So it felt like knight takes g6 is a fine way of playing, and I followed up with queen b3, hitting the b7 pawn. Um, my opponent played a move which sort of surprised me, which is b5, and this I have been told is actually a very common idea in the a6 Slav. When black plays the Slav with a6, generally they're planning on meeting queen b3 with b5. But it really felt like it sort of gives me something to play against no matter what happens because I take it. And if C takes, which is what happens in the game, I play A4, and this is sort of very unpleasant, I think, for black. But if A takes, I wasn't super concerned about this either because it felt like I could just sort of move the queen out of the way, and the knight is sort of tied down to the C6 pawn for now. Probably black is this is the better option for black is to take with the A pawn, open up the rook, but I didn't feel like I was really at risk of anything. And like, yeah, the rooks are open, but I can either, I can just play like A3 and H3, and then the rooks, what are they really doing there? And I can maybe think about getting my knight to the C5 square. I can develop my bishop to cover central squares and castle short, and maybe a bishop can land on B4. So I like just really, it's about the like. I feel like the most important part of this position is the square on c5 and the pawn on c6, which is backward. And as long as I can maintain that, I feel like white has something to play against. But maybe it's not possible to maintain all of that. Regardless, we can look at it, but that's not really that's not what happened in the game. In the game, I think a worse move, c takes, and after a4, it's very unclear how my opponent is going to resolve this. He plays the move which I thought was the only try, which is queen a5. Um, because if not queen a5, I'm threatening to take on b5. Like, what can you really do about this? I have a lot of pieces on it. The pawn is pinned to the rook, so it sort of feels like I'm borderline winning. But yeah, queen a5 is sort of like a little bit annoying, but I felt after queen c3, it gives me this endgame is actually very nice for me. Um, so yeah, here I'm still threatening to take on b4, b5. You can't play b4 because the pawn is still in e6 or e7. They haven't played e6 to cover the squares. So uh, takes, and now I have pressure on a6. And my weakness is on c3, but I can always trade it off for the d5 pawn with c4. What happens now is e6, makes a lot of sense. And now this might not be the most accurate move, but I play bishop b5 check because I'm thinking that I want to be developing with tempo. And it feels like, okay, if the king moves to like d8 or e7, then that's I really, that can't be bad for me. So I've made him play a move which he wouldn't have played otherwise. And if knight fd7, which is what was played, now the knight has come away from the e4 square. As it turns out, though, potentially the knight actually wants to go to b6 to protect the rook and sort of like, pressure c4. So maybe knight fd7 is a move that black wants to play, in which case maybe the bishop should have just gone to d3 right off the bat. Anyway, now I play bishop a3 because this is my bad bishop. Yes, I do have the bishop pair, but if my bishop's not coming along the a3 f8 diagonal, then why is the bishop pair so good? So this gives maybe I should castle first, and after bishop d6, I should just play like h3 and then bishop a3, and that would save a tempo. I don't know. It's all about like saving one tempo here or there, which they might add up over the long run. But I don't think it's too critical that I played bishop a3 and allowed the capture in one go for my opponent. Um, King e7, king e2. Both of us are just preparing to get our last rook onto the queen side, which is where all the action is. Knight b6 does threaten my bishop, so I drop it back. And after rook c8, here I considered rook b1. But after rook b1, I think rook c6 can be played, and it's strange because I'm sort of like I want to be putting my knight on b3 to put it on c5 there, but as soon as I put it on b3, it blocks the connection here and allows rook takes c3. So it sort of felt like after rook c6, yes, he's a little passive, but it's hard for me to see like how I'm going to, because in that position I also can't really play c4 because he has enough pieces on it. So I didn't really know what my next plan was going to be in that position. So instead I play rook c1, which looks a little bit more passive maybe. But now my plan is to play c4. And of course, if I'm allowed to play c5, then I'll be pretty much winning. But after all the trades, which is what happens after a5, all these trades occur, and now it's unclear if I really am better. Like, yes, I have a superior structure on the king side. I'm a pawn up on the king side. It's like this weird 5 versus 4. And on the queen side, black has this pawn, which could be a target, but at the same time, at this point, the pawn is on a dark square, and my bishop is light squared, so I can't ever really threaten to win it there. So unless I can get my king over there, it feels like black at this point has enough to draw. So I think that somewhere between playing bishop b5 check maybe 10 moves ago and now, I played enough inaccuracies that what should have been a reasonable advantage is now not really an advantage. Maybe I'm still better, but I'm not totally sure. Knight c6, I play king d2. I looked at bishop b5. I thought after bishop b5, maybe just king d6 is playable, or even, what was the other move that I was thinking about? Even knight b4 should be playable. I don't know. I wasn't totally sure what my bishop on b5 was doing. It seemed like maybe it would get hit by rook b8 at some point. Regardless, I just play king d2, rook b8 anyway, and now he's starting to come in with rook b2 or rook b1, so I felt like rook b3 was sort of the only move that made sense. And now I think he plays an only move, which is knight b4, because if not knight b4, if he trades, I think the bishop versus knight endgame is winning for white. I might be wrong, but it felt to me that if he trades the rooks on b3, I should win. And it also felt like if he moves the rook away from the b file, then after rook b7 check, I'm sort of getting in. So knight b4 felt like the correct move. I played king c3, and rook c8 is a very important move. And I saw this move when I played king c3, but I didn't see anything better than to play king c3 because a4 is coming. So I need to be like attacking the knight. So after king c3, now I think after rook c8, he's threatening an immediate draw, right? I can't move the king because that will hang the bishop. He's threatening knight d5, which would be like a draw. I play rook a3, and now after knight d5, I'm thinking, okay, I can play king d3, and then if he goes back, I'll just go back, and then maybe at that point I'll consider king b3. But king b3 is very scary. King b3, there's rook b8. If I go to a4, there's rook b4 check, which wins the bishop. And if I go back to the c file, with either well, on c2, then there's rook back to c8, and I end up having to go back to either b3 or d3. And if I go to a2, then I actually lose because I think because of knight b4 check. If I go to the b file, then it's the same. Well, actually, I guess then he might have better, but he at least can go back knight d5 and play rook c8. So that's the draw. Probably better there. And if I go to the other square, which is a1, then there's knight c2 with a fork. So I was looking at all those lines and I was thinking, okay, well, like I guess I'll repeat once and then I'll check again to see if I can do this. But he didn't even repeat. He played knight b6, which is sort of like he's maybe thinking he can try to play for a win. I don't have very much time, but I feel like, it shouldn't really matter how much time I have in this position. It's just if a position is a draw, then you should take the draw. I played bishop a6, and after bishop a6, I think he has to go rook a8. He instead plays rook c1, which I think is probably the move that gives me a sizable advantage. But if he plays rook a8, I don't think I can take on a5 yet because of the move knight d5. Knight d5 threatens knight b4 or knight c7, and if I try to move the rook away somewhere, then there's rook takes a6, and knight b4 with a fork. So I'll show that one. If, for example, if I take or wait, no, rook a8. If I take here, then knight d5, and if I try to move the rook away, like here, for example, to try to play bishop b5 and get out of the pin, then there's rook takes a6, and then I lose to this fork, right? So that's one line. And then the other line after knight d5 is if I try to, if I do nothing, then he's just threatening knight c7. So these are the issues in the position. So I don't think I can take the pawn after rook a8, but instead he goes rook c1, and now I can take the pawn. Now I'm a pawn. I think what he thought is that he would be able to play rook g1, which he does, and after g3 he'll play rook g2. And after rook g2, he's threatening both pawns, and he'll win one back, and then it'll be like, if anyone's better there, it might even be black because the position's relatively close. But the issue is I have this move bishop b7, and now I'm defending the pawn. So unless you want to play this bishop versus knight endgame pawn down, you have to play knight d5. But after knight d5, I can take it, g3, and now if you play rook g2, I can just, which he does, I can just defend, and now the d5 pawn is hanging. So we get this rook endgame where I actually have a passed d pawn, and I'm a pawn up. So this is like sort of a very favorable 3-on-4, and 3-on-4s are more likely to be winning than not, I think. So this felt like it should be like a winning position. We're at the place where I'm in some pretty serious time pressure now. So a lot of these moves, like these weren't recorded, and at some point, we'll get there soon. But at some point, there's a place where there's a lot of checks were given, and I was moving around a lot on the 10-second increment, and I don't totally remember all the moves, so I just get to a position. So there might be like a move that's like obviously very bad in this portion of the game, but it's just so you can see what happened in the game. So king e6, rook e5, rook a5. I play e4. All of these moves are definitely what happened in the game because I remember them very clearly. I get the king to e4, f4, d5, check, king f3, check, d6. So I've sort of maximized. I have this sort of connect 4 structure, right? Connect 4 structure, and it's my rook is very active. His king is extremely passive. So the only thing that he has left is these checks. And sorry, so I thought at least. So in this moment, I saw that I could play king g4, or I could bring the king back to like f2 or g2, or even I could even consider putting it on e4 and sacrificing the g pawn. But I didn't see why it was necessary. Maybe it is a good move. But as I ended up playing king f2 because I thought it was the least committal move. Like if I go to g4, maybe my king is no longer like maybe it can get checked or something. But as soon as I played it, I realized that if I played king g4, I would have the continuation rook a8, king d7, rook f8, king e6, rook e8 check, and then there's no king f5. So I'm going to be able to play. I'm just going to be able to play rook e7 and start picking up these pawns. So that seemed very convincing to me, and so I was sort of regretting not playing king g4, but I felt like, okay, like maybe he'll play rook d2, I'll just go back, and then I'll do it again. But instead he plays a very active move g5, and this makes it, I think, a little bit more difficult for me to win, it's still probably winning. I ended up deciding that I should take it. I felt like if I played f5, then maybe he'll be able to play g4 and create enough counterplay with this g pawn to prevent me from making progress up here. Um, but I'm not sure. I mean, we can look at this at some point. But f takes g was played, and now rook e7 check. And then I played this move g4. So g4 is probably not necessary. Probably the move g6 is already winning, which I was looking at in the game. But again, I'm playing on the increment at this point. So I was trying not to lose on time. The reason I played g4 is because I was very concerned about the move f6. Because f6, if I take it twice, then after rook takes, I can't defend this pawn. So I thought then like g4 is prophylactic move against f6, so I can take it twice. And if he takes on d6, then I'll be able to play g5, and I'll have these two pawns. So like I'll just show like if f6, I can just take, and if he takes g5, and I'll be able to play rook g7 and win two clean pawns up. That's why I played g4. G4 though, he plays rook d3, and now my king is cut. So I play rook a7, threatening mate. Probably king e8 is a better move, although then maybe the same thing happens with g6, because g6, if ever takes, then I basically just play rook e7 and I have the same two pawns here. Yes, he has two g pawns versus my one, but he can't take advantage of that because his king is cut, and his like my king will just be able to support. It will run over this way. So g6 is probably winning there too. So maybe g6 is a better practical try. I play rook a8 check, and now I'm feeling pretty good because his king is boxed. King e2. It felt like I should maybe be able to just run my king up to d7. There, yeah, he can't take the pawn because I'll be able to play d7, and yeah, I'll be able to play king d4. Wait, no. How is this working? Maybe this is maybe these aren't the exact moves because I don't think that something like this was blundered. If that was a blunder. But the idea is this happens where he brings the king back to f8, I bring the rook to d4, a check occurs, king e8, rook a4, check. I don't totally know if all these moves happen, but at some point so this is where sort of like I had all these checks and my rook was going around and all this stuff was happening. And then all I know is that eventually I got this position where I put my rook on f6, which I think is probably not the right thing to do because it makes it so these checks are always possible. But what happens in the game is instead of continuing to check, because I think he's probably worried about king d3, which is fair. Maybe king d3 is good. He plays rook e2, and this position occurred. I don't know exactly how it occurred, but this position occurred. And after e6, I think I am now I took my opportunity. I'm not saying that it wasn't a draw before at some point in this time scramble, but e6 I think is winning because after rook takes, pawn takes, and this is now, I believe, a winning king pawn game. King d4, king d8, he tries, because if he plays king d7, then king e5 is very cleanly winning because I'm just going to take this pawn and win. He tries king d8, which is, it makes sense. If I can't play king e5, then this might actually hold. But I can play king e5 because after king d7, which would normally, this construction is normally like losing for whoever's turn it is, but I have access to the g6 pawn. Takes, and I promote with a check, and he resigns. So that was a very nice game. We can take a look at that one with the engine at this point. The time scramble in the end game I was like very tense the whole time it was occurring, but I always sort of felt like I should win. Let's take a look. So we have the Slav, knight bd2, I think is a nice way to play. Knight h4 is right here. G4, okay. Yeah, again, this is one of those things where like maybe there's a better way to play than knight takes g6 immediately, but knight takes g6 felt like it can't be bad. It's a very nice move just to throw in there. And queen b3 felt like a very nice way to continue. So b5, I guess, is a fine move. In fact, it is the correct way to play. But position is already very nice for white, which is sort of how I felt. Right, like, well, actually, I'm supposed to take on d5. Interesting. Because I guess knight takes runs into, what does knight takes run into? What's wrong with this move? E4, just E4. And if knight f4, then just knight f3, and yeah, knight is hit. It's a very bad position. Okay, so I should just take on d5, not on b5, because yeah, if I take on b5 as happens in the game, then a takes b5 actually is the slight edge for black, or it's just equal. But yeah, this definitely would have been a better try. I was gonna play something like queen c2, stopping c5, or any like of those ideas, e6, and then I was just thinking I could develop normally. Maybe a3 could be played, maybe bishop d3. I felt like I understood how to play this position, but I guess objectively it's just not anything for white. If any, like even it's sort of dynamic play. If black can get active, play this move c5 at some point, then what really do I have? Um, but I guess I got lucky, and c takes was played, and now after a4, yes, I'm much better again. So that's good. Good to know. Queen a5 is not a good move. He should already be sort of desperate with b4. b4, I guess if I take it, then there's like e5 or something. No, just knight c6, and he just plays for counterplay. Okay. Fair. Queen a5 was sort of my anticipated move, but I thought after queen c3, I have a very pleasant endgame, which I do. Ba, rook takes. Yeah, this is sort of around the advantage that I thought it would have, like a +1 advantage. Bishop e5 check is the accurate way of playing, although bishop d3 is about the same, so it doesn't really matter. Knight d7. Bishop a3 not suggested. Probably this is the first inaccuracy. It's fine, but yeah, it's not, you know, not the most accurate. Takes, king e7, king e2, knight b6. Bishop has to drop back to d3. So rook b1 is right. Rook b1 is the correct way of playing. Now I thought after rook b1, rook c6, and I didn't really know what I was doing here. Rook a5, rook ba1, just continuing to put pressure. I don't really understand the reason that I want to include rook b1, rook c6 in order to play rook a1. Like, why wouldn't I just play rook a1 here? Because now, I guess it doesn't really matter. It says for some reason a5 is stronger now. Oh, because I want to play bishop b5, and there bishop b5 is the tempo. Okay, but it doesn't really matter. It feels like there's many ways to play. Rook c1 is, I guess, a little passive, though. But it's fine. a5. C4. Okay, so c4 here. This is sort of where I feel like maybe I should really be trying to build on the position slower, because c4 does allow a lot of trades. And once all of the trades occur, I'm not really, I don't really have any way of being better there. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's already equal. Takes. Here I was even considering taking with the bishop just to keep the rooks on the board, but I was very concerned about the move rook a7. This is the move I was worried about. I guess here, yeah, I guess here I have like rook b1. King d3 is what I wanted to do, but I thought rook c7. What is happening here? Oh, I just take on a5. All right, yeah, fair. Okay, so I guess I could have taken with the bishop too, but rook takes is what I landed on. Takes, knight c6. And yeah, the position is just equal. I don't have really anything because there's enough play with this a pawn, and the material has become too reduced. So c4 is not an accurate way to play. I play king d2, rook b8, rook b3. Wow, I thought knight b4 was like only move, but apparently, yeah, this is just complete misevaluation of the position. I thought in this position that white was borderline winning, but in fact, it is actually black who's playing. I thought my king would just come in here, but my king doesn't really get in. It sort of gets in. I don't know. Why is this so good for black? I guess black is just like, yeah, yeah. I don't really know. I guess black is just fine here. You have to, it says even, oh, well, okay, of course, actually, because the king pawn game is actually bad for me, right? Because of this outside a pawn. But is it? Takes. Yeah, I guess I just lose the king pawn in games. Like, for example, if I play like, or if black plays like this move, if I take this thing, it's just lost, yeah? Yeah, just outside pass pawn. Not good. Okay. So that is probably why this this trade of rooks, I can never win the pawn because if the knight just sits on c6, the bishop can't generate threats because the pawn's on a dark square. The king can't really get in. I guess I could maybe dream of the king landing on b5, but king's on d6, so I can never really do that. Anyway, yeah, misevaluation of the position. Knight b4 was played. King c3, rook c8, and yeah, rook a3 is a good move. And here, yeah, I really don't have anything better than a draw, actually, in this position. Black can play it for a win with knight b6, which is kind of insane to me. But it's just, I really just, this a pawn has actually become so good that doesn't matter. So probably rook a8 was needed here, though, right? Yeah, rook a8 was needed. Or rook h8 actually directly attacks the pawn, so that could have been possible also. But yeah, rook c1 is the mistake. This is what allows me to play for a win, which I felt in the game. I mean, it was very clear to me that rook c1 was not the correct move because I just now take the pawn, and I'm able to keep the pawn like this. And oh, knight d5 is actually, yeah, I guess he needs to keep the knight on the board. Um, this is allowing me to go into this winning. This is now a winning rook endgame, which yeah, felt winning, and it is. Okay, now the rest of this part, I know that my technique was good up until a point, right here, right where I get the connect 4 structure. Now here I should play king g4. And if I play king g4, then there's really, like, I guess he can play g5 anyway, but then my king is like way more advanced. Instead I play this, and now g5. Yeah, I think the correct decision, fg, rook e7, king f8. And g6, yes, g6 is cleanly winning. So this is the way that I should play now. G6 here, like he can't take it because this position is just winning. King comes up to e3 and e4, and I have these two pawns that will. My king can even hide on one of these squares over here. So this is very nice. Instead, I play the move g4, not the most accurate move. Rook d3. Again, I have the option of going g6. I play rook a7, g6. I play check, and yeah. Now, I don't know about all these moves. I think that something like this definitely occurred, because now I played rook a4 in this position, and then I played king c5 in order to play rook c4. I know that's what happened. King c6, king d8, something like this. Now, the rest of these moves, I don't really know what happened, but eventually I got the rook to f6. This is still winning, so it's not. I probably was never at risk of drawing, but it sort of felt like if he kept checking me, I guess I would just play king. Like, how do I get out of these checks? King d4, rook d2, king c, king e3, rook d1. Like, what am I? But I guess I'm always gonna. I get out of the checks by bringing the king to attack the rook, and then I'm able to play e6. That's how this goes. So I was always gonna win. Oh shit! Sorry, apologies for the language. Um, fe, fe. Now here, yeah. Why did I? Fe, king c5. Wow, I messed up. I messed this up. This was not the correct plan. But I got very lucky. Rook takes, and then I win the king pawning game. But okay, let's. Was this the position? I swear that there was a reason that this move was not playable. What was I thinking? Was I just thinking this? No. No, I wouldn't have thought this. Maybe my king must have been on c5. And then this, and then this. I think maybe this was the position. Yeah. All right. So my apologies. I think yeah, because I'm pretty sure I looked at rook g7 check. So here, if rook takes g6, if king can't go to d7 because of rook g6. Yeah. Okay. Apologies. I inputted the game incorrectly. This is the king was on c5 when, but then it's like okay, rook c2. He could have given a check and I would have come back. It was very strange. I remember feeling like he could have kept giving checks, but instead he played this other move, and that allowed me to play e6. Um, yeah, uh, that's the thing with these Game 45 tournaments with the 10-second increment is I don't get to have the full game, and then I'm left to like, especially when it's like a time scramble like this, then I'm sort of like trying to piece together what happened, and I'm never really sure. It's possible that I messed this up. It's also possible that my king was on c5, and that's why it made sense. But I was playing on the increment the whole time, and I potentially got lucky in the end with this rook takes c6, and I think my king was on c5 though. So anyway, yeah, this was the end of the game. Very tense round two, but was very nice to get the win in it. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in round three. Thanks for watching.